Hi, I'm Calvin Morris from Elite Care Services, and this is Elite Care Conversations. Thank you for taking the time to show an interest in the interview processes for Elite Care Services and what we are trying to achieve. That is quite simple. All that we're trying to do is to make sure that the awareness and the stigma around the bad part of care, as it is seen via the media, is squashed, and that we can deliver good quality content, good interviews and great information from the people who work on the front line of the care industry in the care homes and nursing homes. I hope that you enjoy this podcast. Hi, I'm Calvin. Welcome back to Elite Care Conversations. I've got another very special guest with me today, Nicola Murgatroyd. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And she's launched an amazing app for care from a very, very personal situation, which we're going to talk about today. And so first of all, thank you for coming into the studio and joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Calvin. It's a pleasure to be here.
So traditionally with the podcast, I always have a conversation with the people that come in, and the purpose of the podcast is not about us and what we do. It's about unique services in care. And I always love how people create services and products to improve the care industry through their personal experience, which very much is yourself and what you've been through in your life. So can you first of all just start telling us a bit of an outline about yourself, your daughter, and everything that's happened, and how we kind of got to the point of doing this podcast, really, with your amazing app that you've got?
Yes, Calvin, of course. I was a parent carer for 28 years to my daughter Faith, who had multiple special needs. And I found that care was very disjointed, and that information was about her was held in lots and lots of different places. And it was quite exhausting, actually, just arranging her appointments and going to the different doctors and hospitals and assessments and filling in paperwork for allowances, etc. And anyone who's ever cared for anybody, whether it's your mother who's got dementia, or a child, or whatever, these things I think are pretty common in care. I also through my working life had worked in digital health, and that involved bringing together disparate bits of information, etc. So when my daughter sadly died when she was 28, and my working life, I'd built up a company and I'd sold that company, and then I wanted to marry together the two experiences I had, so that of being a parent carer and everything that came with that, and how we had streamlined systems, which was actually in the pharmaceutical industry, and how I could bring that knowledge and that technology into the world of care. And so I started a new company called Curadox Limited, and we have built a product which we call MyLifeRaft.
Okay. I think the name is amazing. I think it's very apt to the situation. Can we just take a small step back there? You were telling me about the company that you built up with in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that in a bit more detail, how we were talking before we started recording? Because I think that's really important to the story of how MyLifeRaft has come around and how it's been created. You were saying about that you had people in you had researchers and doctors, and how that everything was being done paper-based, and that you almost could see a vision of a much more efficient system in your head. Can we just dive into that a little bit?
Yes, sure. This is going back a bit in global clinical trials, and I was working in this pharmaceutical company. My job was to send out a lot of the forms and paperwork around the world to the different what's called investigator sites. So that's to the doctors who carry out who find patients, and then they carry out the clinical study. And that paperwork then has to be all sent back to the pharmaceutical company, and it it was quite a task, because for one clinical study you might have, I don't know, 20 sites around the world, and each one of those sites might have a number of different doctors, so it multiplies up. So it was quite a big task. And I noticed that the people dealing with this in the office were often really highly qualified individuals, and I thought, we could do this in a better way. We could do, we could. I was part of the administrative staff, as administrators, we could help a bit more. We could do a bit more. So we started to do that. And what came out of that was a new role called clinical trial administrator. And then what came out of that was a business idea, because I think, as I'm a bit of an entrepreneur at heart. No, I'm very much an entrepreneur. And so I started a company, and we trained and supplied clinical trial administrators. And then we brought that function into our offices, that function of looking after the paperwork, the trial master files, as they're called, in clinical trials. And then as technology, and we were talking about technology earlier, weren't we? Because I know you use technology in your company. We were talking about, we invented technology which enabled these trial master file pages to be digitised. And the company grew significantly in 10 years to be a multinational company, and is very thriving today. Even though I sold it 11 years ago, it's now a very big global concern, and is still contributing to changing the landscape of clinical trials, which I think we're all very grateful for, knowing, about COVID and vaccines, etc. It's a really important industry.
Yeah. And then it's almost with your personal experience, and you were saying about having these different appointments, and on sorry, I'm skipping forward now to when you're with your daughter, and you were saying about there was points where the same specialist was turning up on a Monday and a Wednesday from two different areas and doing the same tests, or whatever it was that they were there to do, and they didn't know that the other person had visited, because they were almost from different districts or counties or whatever. And it's almost like a repeat of the cycle of what you created with that business that you had previously, just in a different sector of care. So then moving on to onto the app that you've now created, can you just give us a bit more sort of context and detail into that? Because it almost seems like the same problem, but a different problem, if that makes sense, just in a different area. And then, that's obviously coming into your personal life then with everything that happened with your daughter. So can you just tell us a bit more about that, and then sort of how you've then developed the app and the problems that it solves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone who's been, who's involved with caring for somebody else, we all know that it's really quite difficult. You're juggling a lot of different things. You're having to deal with a lot of different bits of information. And certainly when I had my daughter, one of the things that I had to struggle with when she was quite small was all the different people involved. We had an educational psychologist, we had a physiotherapist, we had an occupational therapist, we had the teaching assistant, we were going to 2 or 3 different hospitals. So there were a huge number of people involved around her. And each one of them was asking the same questions, and each one of them was, held the information about my daughter themselves. So we had to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat information.
There was no central database.
There was no coordination. No, it was very tiring and exhausting. And I think, as I said to you, Kevin, earlier, I was very much on the back foot quite often at the meetings we went to and that sort of thing. So when I'd sold my company, and when very sadly I lost my daughter at the same time, and I had some time on my hands, and I thought, well, let's see what we can develop, a digital product that we can develop that would help. And so what we developed with MyLifeRaft is the information sits with you, and then you can share it. It has evolved a bit since then now because of the need nationally for us to bring down unplanned hospitalisations. So that repository, or that you have more control over your own life and your own destiny and your own with health and care, I think we're all beginning to get used to anyway, because that's the way things are going. But what MyLifeRaft does, it enables you to hold your information and then share it with others. It's focusing a great deal now on prevention as well. So to have tools, resources and pathways to enable you to avoid unplanned hospitalisation as you get older.
I mean, it's incredible what you've done and what you've achieved, and just going back to the coordination side of the purpose of the app and what it does. It's, when we were talking before we started recording today, it just, as we talked more, it just seems that there's such a disconnect between the operational side of the NHS or these different specialists that you required to come in, and I think that what the app does, you were talking about it being prevention focused as well, so preventing situations or being able to deal with situations that arise on a daily basis, I feel like there needs to be more more technology of this kind. We talked about government schemes for users of technology, and in care homes in particular, there's a government scheme at the moment where they're looking to get 80% of care homes digitalised, and there will be more schemes that help individuals and families as well, and I think it'd be really good to have that as part of your message about what you're trying to achieve as well, because of course funding comes into this, and being able to afford technologies and subscriptions and whatever else it requires. So just moving on slightly, who is the app for? Is it more going to be businesses and care homes? Is it more individuals like yourself who are going through similar situations?
It's for all of us. It's for the person.
Okay.
It is for the person. We are expecting different companies. It could be a healthcare company to bulk buy licenses. So you may, hopefully you'll be lucky enough to have a license paid for by somebody else, but you own your own data. You own it, and it's portable. So if you, for example, if an employer was to add it to an employment benefits package, which it would be very useful to do, because it brings down stress in people who are caring for somebody, and we all care for somebody at some point in our lives. It's highly unusual not to, have a mother or a father or somebody that you're helping look after, and it can be very stressful when you're trying to work at the same time, or you also have a young family as well. So benefits providers are quite interested in our product. So, you might have your license paid for, but you own it. So then you would have, if you then left that employer, you would have the opportunity then to pay for the license yourself, or you might go somewhere else where another healthcare company might pay for it for you. Yeah. So that's how it works.
And on a slightly wider scale, you mentioned about insurance companies and councils adopting this to put in with the care packages as well. So I think that's a great route to go down.
Yeah,
so
we're currently working with the Isle of Wight Council as part of our development process, because the product is developed in with user input, and it will continue to be. So we are building what people want, but it's also built with the input of healthcare companies and organisations.
And what age group for your main initial launch are you aiming this at? Who because the care industry is vast. So is there an age group that you have in mind that you initially want to use the app?
Yeah, the first launch, which will be early in 2024, is to the 65 plus age group. People who are still healthy and well, but maybe on 3-4 tablets a day.
Okay, all right. Can you just tell me a little bit more also about the appointments and the reminders? And something that really stuck in my head when we were talking about it earlier was that you've got the multiple notifications of, if you like, your care team, which might be your family members. You mentioned about that you're in the Isle of Wight. If you had a family member on the mainland and they needed to get to an appointment or there was an emergency, it's not quick for yourself to be able to come over and give that support. So I think that's really important and a really key feature of the app. Can you just give us a bit more information about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, the app allows for you to build a network of support around yourself. So, for example, if I'm living on the Isle of Wight and I'm living on my own and I don't drive and I need to, but the first bit is education, because what people are not aware of at the moment, generally speaking, is that if you do simple things like making sure you get your eyes tested every 6 months and your hearing tested and your medication reviewed, and quite often that can go on for months. People can take tablets and never push to get their medication reviewed. But if you do those simple things, your chances of having a fall, for example, are drastically reduced. They're reduced by quite a high percentage. And that brings down your risk of an unplanned hospitalisation. And who doesn't want that? None of us want to go to hospital.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if I'm living on my own and I don't manage to get to my eye appointment, or I forget about it, but it's because I find it difficult to get there. So I've asked my neighbour, who's offered to give me lifts, if she would take me to my appointments when I have them, and she's absolutely agreed to that. So on the app, you can set it up so that your neighbour will get a reminder, possibly through her Amazon Alexa, or whichever way she wants to. And we're putting, modern digital technology in the app. So she would get a reminder. So I would get a reminder, say, a few days before to say, Nicola, don't forget your eye appointment is coming up in 3 days' time. And then my neighbour gets the same reminder, don't forget you're taking Nicola to her eye appointment. And my son, who might live in London, will also get a notification to say, Mum's got her eye appointment in 3 days' time. We'll give you another notification on the day, but you might like to call her afterwards to see how she's got on. So it builds that circle of support around you.
And I think that's really good, and I think that's going to be key to people adopting the app and bringing it on board. So you mentioned about integrations as well. So with my experience of growing technology in our business and developing our own systems, I think what's key and what's going to make this successful is that you have those integrations with other systems that already exist, because the world is full of technology, and I think it's really important that you've considered that already. And we talked about data being pushed between the app and other systems that might be in place in a care setting of some kind as well. So so I think that you've thought about that in its fullest form, if you like, so to make sure that it integrates with whatever is in place at the time. So
there is no doubt that digital technology is going to be very fast and very rapid in revolutionising how we all our health and our welfare, and how we're all looked after and how we look after ourselves. Just something I'd like to mention, Gavin, which we didn't talk about downstairs. And that's, before that, there has to be a paradigm shift. There has to be a shift in all of us towards self-care. I'm of a generation, I'm the baby boom generation. We grew up with the NHS. We've all become very reliant on our wonderful NHS, and we all love the NHS, and it is wonderful. But we're very reliant on it. And there is this mindset, if that's what I can call it at the moment, whereby, we think, well, as we get older particularly, if something happens, I'll be looked after. It'll be all right. I can't avoid these things happening. I can't avoid getting older. And yes, I hope it doesn't happen to me, but something might happen to me. And when and if it does, I'll be picked up. The NHS will look after me, the social care system will look after me, whatever. We have to, as a nation, and we can be leaders for the world in this if we can all really get to grips with it really quickly and really fast, in more self-care, in looking after ourselves more and better, and adopting apps like ours so that you know your risk of an unplanned hospitalisation and you take a different path so you can avoid that. So that's, I think, this paradigm shift has to happen first.
Yep.
People's thoughts have to be more, I've got to take the ownership now.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. I'm confident for you that it will be very successful.
Thank you.
So something I'd like to add is that there are government incentives and grants and schemes at the moment to digitalise care.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because your personal experience is more from the end user, the family member, the parents, whoever it might be. But we also talked about adopting this into NHS trusts and care homes, other care settings as well. Yeah. So if anyone is listening to this podcast and are thinking that this app could be something that might apply to you or that you could use, or you own a business that you think that it might be adaptable to, there are definitely grants. I know that in the county of Dorset at the moment there is a £4,000 digital grant, and in case you don't know, a grant means you don't have to pay it back. It's not a loan as long as you put in the technology in this case for that grant, and I think that's going to be really important because we're living in an age where funding at all levels, personally and business, is very tough.
Yeah.
And that's why the government are looking to digitalise more care, being able to have access to these records to give better well-being to everybody. So certainly any area that you live in the UK, you should look at what grant schemes are available if you're looking to adopt a system like this. So
yeah, and please do contact me through Calvin. I'm not sure how you arrange that, Calvin, but because we are working at the moment with an Innovate grant. That's a government grant, and we'd be very willing to talk to any of you, anybody, with regard to partnering to go for a grant to develop a product that fits the needs of your organisation and what. And
Innovate is a great scheme as well. I'm aware of that.
There are quite a few grants out there at the moment, as you were saying.
Yes.
But yeah, very, very, very open to those conversations.
No, that's great. So just getting on to what you just said. So if somebody wants to contact you directly, what's the best way? If do you have a website, social media? What's the best sort of channel to contact you direct?
Yes, if an email would be info@myliferaft.com.
Okay.
And we do have a website, of course, which is about to be updated, just to let everybody know, because it's lagging behind. We've been so focused on development of the app at the moment, but that's fine. Now
is the web address the same as the email?
Yes, it's MyLifeRaft.com.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, if anyone's listening, you want to check it out, and I would suggest that you do. And actually here at Elite Care, we were talking about some of the more recent things that we've started doing with companionship packages. And actually it looks like we might be one of your customers, because I think it would adapt very well to what we're doing. And I love that although we're a technology focused business and we develop our own systems, that actually with the integrations we talked about, it would already integrate with what we've built. And sometimes you don't always need to develop your own stuff when there are perfectly good softwares and apps available such as yours. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversations.
Thank you very much.
So
look, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast and taking some time out to come down to the podcast studio and recording with us. So my name's Calvin Morris from Elite Care Services. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this interview on Elite Care Conversations. I'd just like to say the only way that we're going to be able to make a difference and reach a wide audience is if people like, comment and share this video. Please feel free to do that. It very much helps the cause of the reason that I've decided to do this. Also, if you enjoyed what we're doing, could you please give us a 5-star review either on Google or on Spotify or on YouTube or whichever platform it is that you are watching this on. If you are watching it on YouTube, please do subscribe for future notifications about the different videos that we're going to be uploading. And thank you very much. I'll see you on the next one.